Building off of our previous discussions about historical and 20th century trends and even modern population trends, we're going to talk about the demographic transition model. Very important. We're going to build off of this for a while. But what this is a four-stage model of population change. The idea that regions, country, villages, whatever size scale, go through these various stages as they progress, and they go from developing to developed country status. And here we have the four stages. This here indicates death rates in blue, birth rates in red, and then population growth is that gold or green mustardy color. And so what we have is we have the progression from left to right as a country progresses through this demographic, so population-based transition as they become what we would call developed. And so if we start off at stage one, we can tell death rates high, birth rates high, so a lot of people being born, a lot of people dying. That's not really going to cause high population growth. And so thus we see at the bottom it says low growth. But eventually, an area might move to stage 2 status. So birth rates remain high, but death rates go down. And so with a lot of people being born and a lot of people not dying at young age, living longer, you then thus have very high population growth. And so in those places that have high population growth that we've talked about in previous module sections, they're definitely stage 2 countries. They have very high birth rates, which we showcased on some Wikipedia maps, but then their death rates are still high, but falling down considerably. A lot of this is just advancements in medical technology, distribution of health information, and so forth. Eventually, a country, region, village will move through the next stage, stage 3. And so here, death rates stay continually decreasing, but now birth rates decrease pretty quickly. And so here we have the idea of a family having fewer children, women deciding to have fewer children, so lower fertility rates, lower birth rates. So a population is now starting to stabilize. It's not growing at the same rate it was during stage 2. A lot of our countries that are developing are currently stage 3 status, but they're transitioning. Places like China, India, Brazil. These are kind of these countries that are emerging. They're moving to what we would call stage 4 or developed country status. And this is a characteristic of Western Europe, Japan, North America, Australia, countries that have a very low population growth simply from birth rates. The United States gets a lot of immigration, but our birth rate it's not too terribly high. So here we have low birth rates, low death rates, and thus low population growth. Now I'll give a more nuanced description of each of the different stages. So as I stated, stage 1, high birth rates, high death rates, thus low population growth. And we look at human history, most of it we have been in stage 1. And the idea here is that primitive societies, because they had high infant mortality rates, very low life expectancies, to offset the high death rates, families would have high birth rates. Other things were disease, bad housing, lacking medicine, poor diets were common reasons why death rates were much lower than they are today. And we look at today, 21st century. Very 99.9% of the world is no longer stage 1. So no countries today you can say are stage 1. Next up, stage 2, high birth rates, falling death rates, and so subsequently high population growth. And so the key here is that areas start to modernize for various reasons. We'll get more into those later in the semester. But modernization helps to decrease the death rate. So what is modernization? One of the keys is just better transportation networks, and so food is then transported from surplus areas to deficits. And so the idea of starvation, famine, hitting an area, less likely now that you have better transportation flows, better communication flows that can help get areas that might be going through a drought or going through a period of deficit can get a supply of agriculture, whatever. Other ideas, advancements in medical technology. Simple ideas that it's not a good idea to hang out in pig feces and so forth. This is the idea of public health awareness. People become just more knowledgeable about the do's and don'ts. I don't know where the pig feces thing came from, but anyway, moving on. Another thing, when we see this high birth rate, okay, well, falling death rate, you would think that the birth rate would then fall, immediately as well. Problem here is that the idea, okay, death rates are falling, but if your mother and her mother had 8 kids, well, then you kind of, the idea would become normal. It's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have, a lot of children. So they kind of have this lag period in which birth rates remain high, even though death rates fall. A lot of this is just because family and social norms, kind of, the idea, well, it's what we're supposed to do. This is what we've always done. It's kind of culturally how we were raised and so forth. And so these are some kind of the ideas of modernization. Also, one of the things is got more of a rural society. So stage 2 countries aren't heavily urbanized. They are places that tend to be more rural. And so these are going to be areas in which children are viewed more as economic assets. We'll get to the other idea of how children are viewed economically in stage 3 and 4. And when we look at the more lower income, the places that are what we would consider more poor countries, developing countries, countries that have high birth rates, countries that still have rather high death rates, countries that have corruption. We can go on and on and on. Those are what we would refer to as stage 2 countries. Next up, stage 3. So in response to a lower death rate, now we see that lag no longer. Birth rates start to decline. So no longer do you need to have 6 children now that the chances of them all surviving through their infancy and then through their younger childhood years are quite high. Also, a characteristic of stage 3 countries, increased urbanization. So right now, those countries that are considered stage 3 are rapidly urbanizing. They're having these large rural to urban migrations. We'll talk more about that when we look at economic and urban geography in future sections. Another thing is you're having the changing status of women. So here we see these lower birth rates. So the lower birth rates, no longer are women having 6 children because they're now going to school. They're now going to college, starting a career, deciding to offset the first child until they get their career off the ground. This is something you're seeing more and more of in the United States, but in across the world, and especially in these stage 3 modernizing countries. Another idea is smaller families. So increased contraception. This is more widely distributed, but also more aware. As information becomes widely distributed, you get more spread of condoms, promote more of the idea of abstinence, and so forth. And when we talk about developing country, and that's going to be a term that we're going to use over and over, stage 3 countries and those stage 2 countries, but especially stage 3, these are developing countries. These aren't developed countries. These are on their transition. They're moving from 2 to 3 to 4, but we wouldn't consider these developed countries. These are what we would call developing. Now stage 4, which is where the United States is right now. And so here, low death rates, low birth rates. And so thus, we're in equilibrium. Not a lot of people being born, but not a lot of people dying. People are living longer. So the forces of change are balanced. When I use the term equilibrium, with very low population to minimal population growth because of this low death rate, low birth rate pattern. So like I said, these are our developed countries. Western Europe, Japan, Australia, North America, Canada, United States, good examples of these developed countries. A very useful way to showcase the demographic transition model and how countries transition through these various stages are population pyramids. And these are a graphic display of a population's age and sex structure. And so what it does is it divides a population up First off, males on one side, females on the other, but then looks at the different age brackets, so 0 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and so forth. And one of the things is we have these different shapes that are illustrated here at the bottom. And what these are if you see a population pyramid containing roughly these shapes, what that says is that during that time period, this country, this region, was going through stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. And you'll see what I mean in some examples that follow. So if we see this triangle shape that we see on the bottom left, that is very much a stage 2 country. So we have very high population growth due to high birth rates, lower death rates. Next up, stage 3. And so stage 3 population growth starts to go down as we have decreasing birth rates, decreasing death rates. And then a stage 4, kind of an inverse of that, kind of an upside down triangle. And so if we see a shape like that, that is an example of a stage 4/developed country. Let's take a look at some population pyramids, get a good example of what I was trying to explain in the previous slide. What we have is a country on the left and a country on the right. We have males on one side, females on the other for each of these graphs, and then on the left-hand side, different age groups. And so the country on the left, you can see that the age group 35 to 39 is the most heavily populated age grouping of all of them. So what you could say is this country went through their baby boom about 35 to 40 years ago, assuming that these people would be born 40 years ago. And so then we can say, oh, wonder what happened here. This is a baby boom population. I wonder what caused that. But then you can see how since then they've had a decline of population. So let's put those various shapes that we had on the previous slide onto this country here on the left. We can see that it kind of has at the top this pyramidal right side up triangle shape. And so you could say that this country 50 plus years ago was going through a stage 2 transition. And so high birth rates, thus evident in the widening base. So a increasingly younger population, more births as over time, higher birth rates, but then lower death rates. And so population was growing in this country big time 50 years ago. Then they came through their kind of their baby boom. And so here you start to see population start to stabilize. And so it has its last big push, its last period of high birth rates. And so now birth rates start, in this case, start to transition, start to now go inward. And so you start to see an increasing birth rate. And so now kind of this rectangular box shape, a stage 3. And so here we have a developing country. So in this case, you could also say that this location 30 to 45 years ago started to urbanize, changing status of women. And so this is characteristic of stage 3 countries. This country then eventually had a transition to stage 4, as we now have this upside down pyramid shape. So families choosing to have fewer kids, evident then there being fewer and fewer young individuals. Over here on the right, this is a good example of a stage 2 country. It just continues to widen at the base. It just continues to get fatter at the bottom, thus meaning that you're having more and more young people, high birth rates. But then over time, you can see the death rates are, life expectancy isn't too high in this country, but still people are living longer and longer and longer. And so the idea, well, in the next few years, is this country here going to have a stabilization in its population? Is that birth rate going to start to decrease? We would expect it to. And so eventually this country will evolve to stage 3 status. But will that happen sooner or will that happen more later? That's going to be up to more local specific things that we'll talk about later on in the semester. And so on the left, we've got what we would say a developed country. This is a very characteristic shape. Kind of looks like a Christmas tree ornament. Kind of where it gets wider, then it levels off, and then it gets thinner as you go downward. And on the right, we have a developing country. So whenever you see a pyramid shape, very much a developing country illustrator. And so here we have United States, 1995, population pyramid. One of the things you notice is at the top, more females than males. That makes sense. That's what we see characteristic of all developed countries, is that women outlive men. So beforehand, when we talked about sex ratios, we looked at a lot of those developed countries when they had more females than males. Here's evidence of why, just simply longer life expectancies. One of the things we're going to do is first off put an outline on this shape, because we're going to compare it to future population pyramids in the United States, to kind of get a snapshot of how the United States is changing demographically. First off, we can put the stage 2, stage 3 shapes on the United States historically over time. Now moving to 2010, putting it at that 1995 shape, we can see that actually 2010, the 30-year-old segment, 30 to 40, there's actually fewer 30 to 34-year-olds than there were in 1995. But there are more over 40-year-olds today and more under 25-year-olds than there was in 1995. Essentially all different age groups, you can tell that there's more, except for those that are in those 30s, those that are in that what we would refer to as Generation X, all the alternative grunge rock fans from the 90s. That's that generation. So there's actually fewer 30-year-olds than there was in 1995. One of the things, if we look, once again, more females than males, and that's very much a common characteristic of developed countries. Other things, we can see that baby boom population. And so 2010, one of the things is, in 10 years, this group inside this red, they're going to be retiring. They're going to be moving into nursing homes. They're going to be getting older. And so there's going to be definitely more demand for senior assisted nurses. There's definitely going to be more pharmaceutical sales. There's going to be more hip replacements, yada, yada, yada. So one of the things to kind of look is the changing demographics over time in the United States. And that's going to affect different products, different industries, and so forth. Then we see here, this is what we call the echo boom. So this is the baby boom's kids. So the baby boom population, they then went through their teens, their early 20s. Then they started having kids, and we can then see the echo boom. We call this generation the millennials. So these are a lot of today's college students. Traditional college students are in this segment of the population right here. So we've got two groups. We've got this group that today is in their 40s, 50s, and younger 60s. We call those the baby boomers. And then we have this other group here at the bottom in the red box called the millennials. And then by 2025, we can see just essentially all groups are going to be increasing. So here we put now the 1995 population pyramid. So 30 years later, we're going to see increases at every segment of the population. So this bodes well for teachers. So a lot of dire straits right now for teachers wanting to find jobs. But looking out in the future, we're going to have more K through 12 kids. A lot of this is indicated by migration. This isn't so much about due to high birth rates, slightly due to that, especially in urban areas, but this is more due to migration, which we'll talk about in a future module. Now I'll take a look at some different population pyramids, notice some interesting oddities. What we have here is we have San Diego, age distribution 2000, and ladies, get excited. We have more males aged 20 to 24 by a considerable amount. Even in that 25 to 29 group, we can see more males. This is due to a large naval base being located in San Diego. So because most of those on a naval base are young males, especially in that age segment, this is why you see an oddity as far as more or a sex ratio imbalance in this age cohort here in this location. Next up is Indianapolis, and so Indianapolis has a very clean showcase of that baby boom, and then the Generation X, in which you see lower numbers, and then the echo boom. The next swell there, there in 5 to 9, 10 to 14 age groupings. One of the things that this is also indicates is that a lot of those that are out of high school, that 20 to 24 group that's a little bit decreased, they don't stay in Indianapolis. There is IUPUI, which is definitely growing. And 2000 wasn't as large as it is now in 2010, but there's Butler, small school, and so a lot of those Indianapolis residents go to IU, go to Purdue, go to Ball State, and that's another kind of explainer for why we see this decrease there in that age cohort. Now let's try to name this town in Indiana. I'll give you 5 seconds. Time's up. Bloomington. This is a good indicator of a college town by the massive amounts of young people, especially both sexes, both males and females. So this is a very useful for understanding this next news headline that we're going to see on the next slide. So bad news, Bloomington. We see this report, census, Bloomington poverty rate, tops 41%. But the next line states the obvious, states a key indicator here for understanding that high poverty rate is that the report included college students. And there's exceptions, especially at Bloomington, but most college students, they aren't the super wealthy. So they account for that high poverty rate. And we'll talk about this later on when we talk about Bloomington economically. It's actually one of the shining stars right now in Indiana. It actually has an economy that's doing quite well. And so this makes it seem like the poverty rate, bad news in Bloomington, poverty rate 41%, but it includes college students, which in that previous slide showcased the fact that those college students are a have a big role in that population pyramid.